Hello, everyone. Welcome to our journey through the atheist mind. Thank you, Doctor, for being here. We're really excited that you're here.
Thanks, David. I'm delighted to be here.
And we're really happy that Dr. Nagy Iskander is here. He's a medical doctor and he's also a surgeon. He's the fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons of England, and he practiced surgery for over 25 years. We're happy that you're here because we're asking hard questions and you're giving us harder answers. And you're making things sound different than what we're known for so many years and what we're used to.
Yeah.
And we're just encouraging everybody that's watching to keep thinking about it, keep listening, keep an open mind. We've talked about atheism in general. We've talked about religion. We've talked about science. And we wanted to kind of focus our attention on one of the biggest points maybe for atheism in general, which is the origin of life. Do you think, or does atheism in general explain the origin of life?
That's a very good question, David. And before I answer that, I'd like you to listen to Richard Dawkins, who is an atheist, and he's declaring he's an atheist. He travels the world to tell people there is no God. So we'll listen to him first and see how he explained the origin of life. And then we will take it from there, because it's better to hear from them. When I say them, it is the atheist group, to see how they understand the origin of life. So let us listen to this clip quickly.
What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. Well, but that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
I think this clip explains a lot. When Professor Richard Dawkins was asked how life came about on the Earth, he said it's probably, look at the word probably as well, there is no certainty, there is no science behind it. It could start in another planet. We don't have any planet till now which is suitable for life as we know it on Earth. But he's willing to believe, that's a belief system now, it's not science, to believe that there is another planet which is suitable for life. And then he said probably another civilization developed to a high level by Darwinian evolution there. Again, that's a big jump of faith, really. He believes that another civilization started in a place which is not suitable for life and reached to a very high level of sophistication to implant life on Earth. This is really not science at all to start with. It's assumption after assumption. And these assumptions are not based on science. It's based on personal belief. And we should differentiate from now on between what the scientist says as a science and what he is saying as a belief system, because there is a big difference between the two. So Professor Dawkins saying that life started in another planet. He can't specify that planet because we don't have one suitable for life as Earth. He said there is a civilization developing there, implanted life on us. Can you imagine a little cell full of life? I'll follow the assumptions of Professor Dawkins. Flying in the outer space, which is full of X-rays to kill it, but we'll assume it will live. That's a big assumption, by the way. And then it will come to the layers of the atmosphere and penetrate these layers, which is very, very cold up there, penetrate all these layers and survive. That's another miracle, actually. But they don't believe in miracles because they don't believe in God. And then this cell will come and be implanted on Earth and develop plants, develop humans, develop animals. This is a big leap of faith. This is what I call blind faith. And that's completely different from the biblical faith, which explains that God is outside time. God is a spirit. And God created time and created matter, created the universe, created humans, prepared their food, prepared the atmosphere they can live in. That's a completely different starting point. So if we try to address the question of how atheism can explain the origin of life, you heard Richard Dawkins explain it. By the way, there is another way. They say life started in the water, and the water became before they became reptiles, they became animals that can live in the water and live on land, like the frogs. And then the reptiles started to fly, and then creeping animals came on Earth, and then man at the top. So there's another route, by the way. Nobody knows from their point.
And just to clarify, when we're talking about the origin of life, are we talking about the origin of life on Earth or the origin of life, period?
Yeah, we're talking mainly on our origin of life on Earth, because that's the life we know. We don't know about angelic creatures, because the Bible doesn't explain that, and science cannot really give an opinion about this at all, because they are spirits, and science can deal only with material things. So when we talk about the origin of life, we talk about the origin of life on Earth. That includes human life, animal life, marine life, but the plants are completely different, because the plants don't have a soul. They are packages of energy that God created on day 3 in the week of creation in order to be a source of food and energy. And by the way, when you read in chapter 1 in the book of Genesis, it tells us that the food that God allowed his creatures to consume was mainly plants. And we read that God gave every plant that produces fruit to be for birds, for creeping animals, for humans. Men and women were allowed to eat meat because there was no killing, by the way, in the beginning, because there was no sin. When sin entered, death entered with sin. So Adam cannot just slaughter a chicken and have it for dinner, because there was no slaughtering at all of anything. But he can eat fruits, because when you harvest a fruit, when you take an apple, for example, from a tree, you are not killing it. It is meant to be a package of energy for you to consume. But in the covenant after the flood, God allowed men and women to eat flesh, but this is after they slaughter it properly and drain the blood and all of that. That was allowed in the covenant after the flood.
So in terms of the origin of life, period, it's really easy for us to say that we don't really know, or at least we can examine that in a scientific way.
Exactly.
You can't scientifically say this is where life started, or because then you got to define what is life, and how can you say what is life, and how can you explain how life started in general?
Exactly. That's a big question, David. What is life? We examine the manifestation of life. The cell can reproduce. There is respiration. There is energy production. There is packaging of energy. That's manifestations of life. But what is life? Mm-hmm. Because when an animal dies, the DNA is still there, and the cells are still there. It will start decaying. But what is taken is life. What is life? And you can't measure life in the lab.
Right.
So, but we all understand life as we experience it. So we know a living person from a dead person. But what is life is a bigger question, yes.
Yeah, and the explanations don't necessarily address that at all, whether in this video or other means of like atheism in general as ideas, because it's really abstract in a sense that we can't necessarily comprehend it, and obviously nobody was there to tell us exactly what happened. But now, in the matter of the origin of life on Earth, even like that video or the idea of like starting in cells in water or all those things don't explain, well, where did Earth come from to start with? Because even if it's in the water, or well, how did the living beings on the other planets started? Because they're still living beings and they're still went to a level of intelligence, which sounds like the story of the Earth. Like, you know, you kind of like evolved again and developed and went to a level of intelligence that you're able to create like spacecrafts and go live on another planet. So it sounds like just a replication of what we're living, or at least what we hope to achieve maybe someday when it's really hard to live on Earth.
Yes, but let me just address this issue, because lots of people think that, oh, we can go, and if we are overpopulated here, we can go to another planet. That is really not scientific at all.
Well, Elon Musk is convincing us that we can live in space, so we're kind of believing him now.
No, I like him to try first. Yeah. I'm not for Musk at all with this. But what I'm trying to say here, if you see the astronauts and the things that they wear, and the food that they consume, and their body mass when there is no gravity, and they spend some time in the space and come back, can you imagine the 8 billion people living on Earth now traveling to space and living somewhere else? Can you imagine that?
No way. Yeah.
No way, really, no way. It's not even, it's beyond science fiction, really. But unfortunately, in the films and things, they give us the impression that, oh, that can be done. I remember a young boy who used to come to a sort of a Bible class, and he was excited about when we go to the moon and live on the moon. And I listened to him really intently, and I didn't suppress his enthusiasm. But at the same time, what are you going to eat there? Do you have these packages that NASA prepares for the astronauts for 8 billion people? How can they live? How can they reproduce? How can they have a house? How can they breathe? Because you see the breathing instruments, they are massive. I think we are happy on Earth. and I'm happy to accept the explanation. The only eyewitness, who is God himself, wrote by the Spirit and by the declaration in the Bible, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And he progresses to explain the stages that he used to create. And he doesn't need time, by the way. God doesn't need millions of years to do things. He do that by his command. So that's a completely different starting point, David. Really completely different.
Yeah, and I think that's why I was asking, because it sounds like, sure, the complexity of if I'm an atheist and I'm trying to explain the origin of life using, you know, Darwin's work or other work in science in general, like the development and all those things are going to make sense. But the issue with the origin, the beginning, doesn't seem to be clear, I guess.
Yes.
Like, how did it start?
Yeah.
And it's okay for us to say that we don't necessarily know. We can have theories or ideas about it. But if we're going to spend a few minutes, can you explain the origin of life from a point of view of a Christian?
Yes. Life comes from life. And we established that with the biogenesis experiment, as I explained before. Let me just review it quickly. If you have a piece of meat which is rotten, you find some worms coming out of it. That means a dead flesh produced life. Louis Pasteur came in and studied this. He found ova of flies which hatch in this environment. So he came with the concept of biogenesis. That means life comes from life. So from the Christian point of view, we believe God is life. In him there is life. So God is life, and he's able to create life. And he described how he created this life in the book of the beginnings. It's called Genesis, because that's the beginning of creation of the world, beginning of human race, beginning of the fall of man, beginning of God's plan of salvation, beginning of choice of Abraham and his descendants through whom the Lord Jesus Christ will come. So it's a very important book because it's the beginning, it's the foundation. So from the Christian point of view, we believe that life comes from life, which is very scientific. And we believe that God is life and he created life. And we believe he created that supernaturally, because life cannot be produced by natural mechanisms. As I said, they tried to create a cell. They couldn't, and they didn't, and I don't expect them they will succeed in that, because the complexity of the cell membrane is very complicated. And all these reactions in order to produce protein has to be inside a cell. And it has a membrane. This is very, very complicated, very complicated. So I accept in clear understanding of science and faith what God explained to me in the Bible, that in the beginning God created the heaven and earth, and he created supernaturally. So that is the understanding of life origin from the Christian point of view. It is supernatural and the source is God.
And it makes more sense now why when you talk about somebody that believes that there is no God, it's hard for you to comprehend anything else.
Exactly.
Because you're saying that it's all based on God.
Yes.
Because God is life and he creates life because he's life.
Absolutely.
And he's always been around.
Exactly, because it's outside time.
Right. Yeah, so when we say always, it's inside time. When we say it happened some time past there in the future because we're inside time, but because he's outside time, then he's, I guess, always been there, because I don't have another word to explain it. And you're saying that when you take God out, you can't explain life.
Exactly.
Because if you're life and you are the source of life, then if I take you out, then life ceases to exist.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I have this question all the time: who created God?
Yeah.
Excuse me. That's a very interesting question, because we have yesterday, today, and tomorrow, because we are part of the solar system. So the Earth rotates around itself to make a day. The moon rotates around the Earth to make a month. The Earth rotates around the sun to make a year. So that's why yesterday, today, and tomorrow. God is outside time completely. So he is not governed by yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So he has no beginning and no end. If I take this glass and leave it, it will drop, because the gravity will pull it down. If I take the same glass to the outer space where there is no gravity, I leave it, it will not drop. So you can't apply the laws of gravity to a body which is outside gravity. You can't apply the laws of time to a person who is outside time. So the question really doesn't stand, who created God? Because he is the beginning and the end, the Alpha and Omega. So he is from the beginning, which is a far, far beginning outside time, to the end, which has no end. So that's what applies to God.
Right. And because we don't necessarily comprehend the concept of not being in time, because we're used to time our entire lives. So even when we say God is from the beginning, well, there isn't a beginning and there isn't time, right?
Exactly.
There isn't an end if there isn't time. So it feels like it's so abstract to us that we can't necessarily comprehend it.
Yeah.
But it explains that God is life in the sense that that's what we believe, or that's what we're saying the origin of life is, because God is life.
Yes.
And out of him, everything was created.
Exactly.
And everything is sustained right now.
Absolutely.
With his life.
Yeah. And it's not an assumption, because he declared that.
Right.
Because we cannot just sit here and examine how God looked like, because he has to explain who he is. Imagine this table is trying to understand the designer, the engineer who built it together. I'm sure you'll have a very hard time to understand.
Well, if you understood something that's much bigger than you, then it's not bigger than you.
Exactly.
Because you're able to comprehend it. And
Absolutely.
the problem with this answer is atheists or people in general say, well, you don't understand, and you're saying you don't understand, and you can't explain something you don't understand.
Yeah.
But we're not saying that we don't understand. We're saying that it makes sense that whoever created, whatever you want to call it, the power of intelligence created everything super complex that we're living in. And we've talked about how complex just the body is. There's a lot more complexity. We're saying that we are unable to contain that much information because we're limited. But that doesn't make it sound like God doesn't exist or that power doesn't exist, because we can see around us the product,
the manifestation of this power. Absolutely, absolutely. Because we know in part, we don't know everything. And nobody claims that he knows everything, because if he does that, he needs to see a psychiatrist. But really, we know in part. But what we know in part is enough for us to be confident of God the Creator and confident of God the Savior. Do you know, David, the problem of people who try to refuse God is they don't want to face him. And I don't blame them, because we are all falling short of the standards of God. But Christianity offers God the Creator and God the Savior. And that keeps me comfortable, because I'm able now to approach God not on my own merits, but because Jesus paid the penalty of my sin. And because of that, I can communicate with God, who is a holy God.
Yeah. Thank you for that explanation. I know we can talk about it for longer than that. To try to comprehend and understand something so abstract, or at least really hard. And that's where maybe faith or belief comes in.
Yes.
And I know we have a few minutes, but I wanted to ask you a question that's not necessarily related, but it is. When it's something that's trending right now, right? And I know we didn't talk about those questions or anything. I'm just going to throw it out here.
Right.
What do you think about when we say that we've created AI? So we've created artificial intelligence. We did.
Yes, exactly.
And that artificial intelligence is capable of doing things that we can't do.
Yes.
In a way that we were able, as a higher intelligence, to create something to work for us.
Yes.
That has its own, whatever you want to call it,
power,
mind or power or whatever it is.
Yeah. But we have to feed these machines for AI to be able to produce what we want. So we are feeding information again. You can feed massive amounts of books and things and ask the AI, and they can arrange that very quickly, because super computers, and give you an answer very quickly. But the machine itself has to be fed by information. And that takes us to the very first episodes that we discussed, the issue of information. Information comes from intelligence. The AI machine cannot cannot produce information from the beginning. You have to feed the information in, and then they can process it quicker than you and me and can produce wonderful things. But you have to feed them information first. There was a lovely book called In the Beginning Was Information, because that's true. Information is very important, and information is not matter. As I said before, if you have a CD-ROM with Encyclopedia Britannica and an empty CD-ROM and you weigh them, they are the same weight, but one carries information. So the AI is I'm excited about what the AI can do.
I'm a bit scared about what it can do.
It's scary as well, definitely. But AI, artificial intelligence, is really the next step. And when computer came about, we were just excited, and it's great and still working. But the AI will take us to another level, and we look forward to that, and to use it for the glory of God again, for communicating the message of God's love to the world in a modern way. So we can use it in a good way, but you have to feed the machine.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it makes sense that it's we call it intelligence, and we call it, that we've created it.
Yeah.
But in a way, it's still a machine, and in a way, you still have to give the information part.
Exactly.
And if you unplug the machine, it's not going to work too. So
exactly.
that's in a way, it's not going to work, right?
Absolutely. So that's completely from life, really. Your computer is dead. He was not alive at any stage, really.
Right.
But that's an expression, or the battery is dead.
Yeah.
So these are expressions of lost power. Mm-hmm. But life is much more than power.
Yeah.
Life comes from life, from God. And Jesus said, I came to give them life, and life to the full. The Christian life is not a miserable one, by the way. It's not rules and regulation, and life is very tight. It protects you and gives you happiness and joy and meaning as well.
Wow. I think that's what it all kind of comes down to and what we're talking about. And I like what we kind of asked today, not necessarily answered. It's more of like, what is life?
Yeah.
What does life mean? And I know we've talked a little bit about it. We can keep talking about it for a while, but I want to ask you, you're just sitting there and thinking about it. What do you think life is? What does life mean? Where did life come from? What is alive? What is dead? Is someone breathing alive, or is someone that's living a full life, or what does a full life mean? A lot of questions that we need to think about and examine, really. I really encourage you to examine everything we're saying, look it up, use AI to find the answers. Everything we're saying, from quotes, from names, we've definitely said things that aren't accurate, or maybe I messed up or in something. But the point here is you have to examine it and understand it and really think about, what does life mean? What does your life mean? And I want to use the words of Socrates, or Socrates, whatever you want to call him. He said that the unexamined life is not worth living. So I encourage you to examine your life, not my life, not other people's lives. They can do whatever they want, but you examine your own life and think about it and try to come up with your own answers, because you have a worldview, you have a story that you're living. And if you don't examine it, you're just going to keep living. Thank you for watching or listening. And thank you, Doctor, for being here. We'll see you next time.